Before you skip this message, understand something very clearly. What is happening right now is not random, it is not coincidence, and it is definitely not your imagination. God is exposing what they tried so hard to hide. The silence, the distance, the sudden shift in energy, it all has a spiritual reason. If you have been feeling that something is changing beneath the surface, this message is going to confirm exactly what your spirit already sensed. Don't leave halfway, because the deeper truth is revealed step by step. Watch this full message till the end. Only then you will truly understand what God is doing behind the scenes and why this exposure is happening now. They thought they could hide it forever, bury it under silence, ego, distance, and distraction, but what they didn't realize is that when God decides to reveal what is hidden, no mask can survive, no pride can protect, and no running can prevent the truth from rising to the surface, because God is exposing their hidden emotions, and what you are witnessing right now is not coincidence, not luck, not karma alone, but divine orchestration moving behind the scenes in ways they never expected. Because the same person who acted cold, indifferent, unbothered, and emotionally unavailable is now feeling waves of emotion they cannot control, and they don't even understand why your absence feels louder than your presence once did, why your silence echoes in their mind, why your detachment unsettles their peace, and why the very emotions they tried to suppress are now demanding to be felt. Because when God exposes hidden emotions, He does it in layers, first by removing distractions, then by confronting the heart with truth, and finally by allowing conviction to sit heavy on the soul until it can no longer be ignored. And the truth is, they were never as unaffected as they pretended to be, they were never as strong as their ego projected, and they were never as free from you as they tried to convince themselves, because deep down they felt more than they admitted, cared more than they showed, and feared losing you more than they ever confessed. But pride is a powerful mask, and insecurity is a skilled actor. So they chose avoidance over vulnerability, distance over honesty, and silence over confession, thinking time would erase emotion, thinking space would weaken connection, thinking you would always chase, always explain, always fight for clarity. But something shifted the moment you stopped reacting, the moment you stopped begging for understanding, the moment you surrendered the outcome to God. Because surrender activates divine exposure, and when you placed the situation in God's hands, you unknowingly set in motion a spiritual mirror that began reflecting their true feelings back to them, and now they cannot escape what they truly feel, because God has a way of isolating the heart from noise so it can hear its own truth. He has a way of allowing them to experience the very absence they once took for granted. He has a way of turning silence into realization and distance into revelation. And suddenly the distractions don't work like they used to, the conversations with others feel empty, the validation they sought feels temporary, and the confidence they displayed feels hollow, because hidden emotions do not disappear. They accumulate, they build pressure, and when God decides it is time, that pressure turns into awareness, and awareness turns into discomfort, and discomfort turns into confession, whether spoken out loud or whispered in the privacy of their own thoughts. Because you cannot suppress what God is illuminating, you cannot deny what God is revealing, and you cannot outrun what God is bringing to the surface. And right now they are confronting emotions they buried long ago, emotions of regret for the words they didn't say, for the effort they didn't give, for the love they didn't express properly, for the times they chose ego over connection, and what makes it even more intense is that they are realizing you were genuine, you were patient, you were real, and you were offering something rare, but they misjudged it because sometimes people only recognize value after they feel the loss of it, and God allows that recognition not to punish but to teach, not to destroy but to awaken, because exposure is not cruelty, exposure is clarity, and clarity is necessary for transformation. And while you may think nothing is happening because you cannot see their internal battle, understand that the loudest wars are often silent, the deepest shifts are invisible, and the most powerful revelations happen behind closed doors, and they are questioning themselves now, questioning why they reacted the way they did, questioning why your detachment hurts more than they expected, questioning why memories resurface at random moments, questioning why they feel drawn to check on you even when pride tells them not to, because when God exposes hidden emotions He removes the illusion of control, and they are realizing they never truly controlled their feelings. They only delayed facing them, and now delay is no longer an option, because growth demands honesty and honesty demands vulnerability, and vulnerability is the very thing they avoided, but avoidance cannot survive divine timing, and you must understand something important. This exposure is not about revenge, it is not about proving you were right, it is about alignment, it is about truth surfacing so that decisions can finally be made from authenticity instead of fear. Because as long as emotions remain hidden, people act from defense, but once exposed they must choose. Either step into maturity or retreat further into ego, and that choice is theirs, not yours. Your role was never to force realization, your role was to maintain your dignity, protect your peace, and trust that what is meant to be aligned will be aligned without manipulation. And by stepping back you gave space for God to step in, and that is why things are shifting, that is why energy feels different. That is why you sense something changing even if no words have been exchanged, because spiritual shifts precede physical communication, and conviction precedes confession, and sometimes before someone reaches out externally they have already reached a breaking point internally, and they are at that point now where pretending requires too much effort and honesty feels inevitable, because God will not allow a heart to remain comfortably numb when there is growth waiting on the other side of truth. And what they once labeled as weakness they are now recognizing as depth, what they once dismissed as emotional intensity they now understand as genuine connection, and what they once tried to replace they now see cannot be duplicated, because authenticity is irreplaceable, and when God exposes hidden emotions He also exposes comparisons. They begin to see the difference between surface-level interactions and soul-level resonance. They begin to understand that not every connection carries the same weight, and they begin to feel the absence of what was spiritually significant. And significance cannot be ignored forever, it calls, it echoes, it lingers, and it teaches, and while they wrestle with these revelations you must remain steady, because the exposure happening in them is confirmation that your value was real, your presence was impactful, and your love was not imagined, it was felt deeply even if it was not acknowledged openly. And sometimes the validation you seek does not come through apology immediately, it comes through transformation, through changed behavior, through humbled energy, through softened pride, because true exposure humbles a person. It strips away arrogance and replaces it with awareness, and awareness is the beginning of accountability, and accountability is the foundation of reconciliation, whether with you or within themselves, and even if the outcome is not what you originally envisioned, know that nothing was wasted, because God uses every interaction to refine both hearts involved. He reveals hidden emotions not just to them but to you as well, showing you your strength, your resilience, your capacity to detach without bitterness, your ability to trust divine timing instead of forcing human outcomes, and that growth is powerful, because when you stop chasing clarity and start embodying peace, you shift the entire dynamic, and that shift forces truth to rise, because peace is intimidating to those who expected chaos, silence is powerful to those who expected reaction, and detachment is transformative to those who relied on your pursuit. And now they are seeing you differently, not as someone who will always be available regardless of treatment, but as someone who has standards, someone who has faith, someone who trusts God enough to let Him handle what you cannot control, and that realization alone is enough to stir emotions they tried to keep dormant, because respect often follows distance, appreciation often follows absence, and understanding often follows loss. And while they process all of this internally, you continue elevating, because exposure is not just about revealing feelings, it is about preparing hearts for truth, and truth prepares people for alignment, and alignment only happens when both individuals are honest with themselves first, and God is making sure honesty cannot be avoided any longer. He is removing the comfort of denial, He is dissolving the safety of distraction, and He is amplifying the voice of the heart until it becomes undeniable, and when that voice becomes too loud to ignore, action follows, whether it is an apology, a confession, a changed attitude, or a silent acknowledgement that they mishandled something meaningful, and regardless of how it manifests, understand that what is happening now is divine justice balanced with divine mercy, because God does not expose to shame, He exposes to heal, and healing begins with truth, and truth begins with emotion, and emotion begins with vulnerability, and vulnerability begins with surrender, and surrender is what you chose. When you stopped forcing and started trusting, and that trust is why you are at peace while they are in reflection, that trust is why you can sleep while they are replaying memories, that trust is why you feel lighter while they feel the weight of realization, because when you give it to God you release the burden, and when they tried to control it themselves they inherited the burden, and now the burden is teaching them what you already learned. That love requires courage, that connection requires honesty, and that timing belongs to God, not to fear, and as this process unfolds do not interfere, do not rush, do not doubt, because exposure has a rhythm, and divine timing has precision, and what is meant to surface will surface completely, not partially, not temporarily, but thoroughly, because when God exposes hidden emotions He does it with purpose, ensuring that whatever comes next is built on truth instead of illusion, and whether that next chapter includes reconciliation or redirection, it will be aligned, it will be clear, and it will be free from confusion, because confusion cannot survive exposure, and what is hidden cannot remain hidden when God decides it is time for revelation. So remain steady, remain faithful, remain detached from outcomes but connected to peace, because the same God who is exposing their hidden emotions is also protecting your heart, guiding your steps, and ensuring that whatever unfolds next will honor the growth you have embraced and the faith you have maintained, and in the end you will see that nothing was random, nothing was delayed without reason, and nothing was exposed without divine intention, because when God moves behind the scenes He is not just revealing emotions, He is rewriting stories, reshaping hearts, and realigning destinies according to a plan far greater than pride, fear, or temporary silence could ever control. What they are experiencing now is not just a passing wave of nostalgia or a random emotional moment, it is a deep internal awakening that God Himself is allowing to unfold, because when God begins exposing hidden emotions He does not stop at surface feelings, He goes deeper into the layers they built to protect themselves, into the childhood wounds they never healed, into the fears of abandonment they never admitted, into the insecurities that made them push away what they actually desired, and now all of that is surfacing at once, creating a pressure inside them that feels unfamiliar and overwhelming. Because they are no longer able to blame circumstances, distance, timing, or even you for what went wrong, they are slowly realizing that the real battle was always within themselves, and that realization is humbling, because it forces a person to confront the truth that they sabotaged something meaningful out of fear rather than lack of feeling, and when God shines light on that truth it becomes impossible to ignore. They replay conversations in their mind, they analyze moments they once dismissed. They remember the sincerity in your voice, the patience in your effort, the consistency in your presence, and now those memories carry a different weight, because hindsight powered by divine exposure creates clarity that ego could never provide, and clarity is both painful and transformative, painful because it reveals mistakes, transformative because it opens the door to growth. And they are standing in that doorway right now feeling the tension between who they were and who they are being called to become, because exposure creates a choice: remain defensive and unchanged or become accountable and evolved. And the reason this process feels so intense for them is because they never expected you to truly detach. They believed your love would always chase, always explain, always return, but when you chose peace over pursuit and faith over control, something shifted in the spiritual realm. And God used your stillness as a catalyst for their awakening, because sometimes silence speaks louder than confrontation, sometimes absence reveals more than arguments ever could, and your calm energy has become a mirror reflecting back everything they tried to avoid within themselves, and mirrors are uncomfortable when someone is not ready to see their own reflection, but God does not delay reflection forever. He allows it at the appointed time when the lesson can no longer be postponed. And now they are noticing patterns in themselves they once justified. They are recognizing emotional immaturity they once defended. They are feeling the weight of pride that once felt powerful but now feels isolating, because pride may protect the ego but it starves the heart, and their heart is no longer willing to starve in silence. It wants truth, it wants expression, it wants release, and that internal craving for authenticity is part of the exposure, because hidden emotions demand to be acknowledged before they can be healed. And healing requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage, and courage is exactly what they lacked before but are now being forced to develop. And while you may not see the tears, the sleepless nights, the quiet moments of regret, understand that spiritual conviction is often invisible but deeply real, and God has a way of isolating someone emotionally so they can no longer distract themselves from what they truly feel. He removes the noise. He quiets the crowd. He limits the temporary validations, and in that quiet space emotions grow louder. And what once felt manageable now feels undeniable, because they cannot run from their own thoughts, they cannot silence their own conscience, and they cannot escape the memories that now surface at unexpected times, reminding them of what was genuine and what they mishandled. And this is not about guilt alone, it is about awakening, because God does not expose simply to condemn, He exposes to correct, to redirect, to mature, and to align, and alignment only happens when illusions fall away. And the illusion they carried was that they were unaffected, that they could replace depth with distraction, that they could suppress longing with pride, but illusion collapses under divine truth, and now the emotional walls they built are cracking, and through those cracks feelings are pouring out, feelings of missing you, of admiring your strength, of questioning their decisions, of wondering if they lost something irreplaceable. And that wondering grows heavier each day because God is not allowing the thought to fade, He is amplifying it until it transforms into awareness, and awareness transforms into responsibility, and responsibility transforms into action, and whether that action becomes communication or simply personal growth, it will not leave them unchanged. Because once hidden emotions are exposed, a person cannot return to ignorance, they can only move forward with truth. And truth changes everything, it changes how they see you, how they see themselves, and how they approach relationships in the future, and while this is unfolding within them, you are being strengthened in a different way, because God is teaching you patience without anxiety, detachment without bitterness, faith without desperation, and that inner stability is powerful, because it ensures that if they return, they must return with maturity, not confusion, with clarity, not mixed signals, with accountability, not excuses. And if they cannot meet that standard, then their exposure will still serve a purpose by redirecting both of you toward better alignment, because divine exposure is never wasted, it either restores properly or removes permanently, but it always reveals truth, and truth is the foundation for whatever comes next, and as you continue focusing on your growth, your purpose, your peace, remember that what is happening behind the scenes is not accidental. God is orchestrating internal shifts you cannot see, He is softening hearts that once felt rigid, He is humbling minds that once felt certain, He is stirring emotions that once felt buried, and all of this is happening because timing has shifted, seasons have changed, and what was once hidden must now be revealed, because you cannot step into a new chapter carrying unspoken emotions from the last one, and God refuses to allow unfinished emotional business to remain buried when destiny requires clarity. So trust the process even when it is silent. Trust the movement even when it is invisible, because the same God who exposed their hidden emotions is also guarding your future, ensuring that whatever unfolds next will be rooted in truth, strengthened by growth, and aligned with a purpose greater than temporary pride or fear ever allowed before. As this process continues to unfold beneath the surface, understand that what God is doing now is separating emotion from ego inside of them. And that separation is not easy because for so long they allowed pride to speak louder than their heart, they allowed fear to disguise itself as strength, and they convinced themselves that staying distant was safer than being vulnerable. But when God exposes hidden emotions, He begins dismantling the false identity a person created to avoid feeling deeply, and now they are recognizing that the version of themselves that walked away, stayed silent, or acted indifferent was not their highest self but their most guarded self. And that realization creates an internal conflict because part of them wants to maintain control, while another part of them wants to surrender to what they truly feel, and surrender feels risky to someone who has always relied on control, yet control is slipping from their hands because emotions illuminated by God cannot be managed the way they used to be. They are stronger now, clearer now, impossible to rationalize away, and they are beginning to understand that what they felt for you was not temporary attachment, not convenience, not ego validation, but something that carried spiritual weight, something that challenged them to grow, something that required emotional maturity they had not yet developed, and instead of rising to meet it at that time they retreated. But divine timing does not erase unfinished lessons, it revisits them, and now the lesson has returned with greater intensity because you are no longer standing in front of them asking for clarity, you are standing in your own peace. And your peace is highlighting their unrest, your growth is highlighting their stagnation, and your silence is amplifying their internal noise, because when one person evolves and the other remains in denial, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore, and God is using that contrast to awaken them, to show them what they lost access to through their own decisions. And this awakening is not comfortable because it forces them to sit with regret without immediately fixing it, to feel longing without knowing your current openness, to question whether they still have an opportunity or whether they allowed pride to close a door that was once wide open, and uncertainty is humbling, especially for someone who once believed they held emotional power in the situation. Because now they feel the shift, they sense that you are no longer energetically waiting in the same way, and that realization shakes them, it unsettles them, it makes them reflect more deeply than before. Because people often only measure value accurately after they feel distance, and distance has become their teacher, showing them the depth of what they tried to minimize. And as God continues exposing their hidden emotions, He is also exposing their motives, their fears of intimacy, their avoidance of accountability, their habit of testing loyalty without offering security, and seeing these patterns clearly is both painful and liberating. Painful because it reveals their shortcomings, liberating because it offers a chance to break them. And this is where transformation either happens or doesn't, because exposure alone is not the end goal, transformation is, and transformation requires humility, and humility requires admitting not only that they had feelings but that they mishandled them, that they cared but expressed it poorly, that they wanted connection but sabotaged it out of fear. And admitting these truths internally is the first step toward any external change. And whether they speak these realizations to you soon or later, the shift has already begun within them, and once a heart shifts, it cannot fully return to ignorance, because awareness changes perception permanently, and they are perceiving you differently now, not as someone easily replaced, not as someone overly emotional, not as someone who would always tolerate confusion, but as someone rare, someone aligned, someone whose presence carried peace they did not fully appreciate until chaos returned in your absence. And chaos has a way of revealing what peace once provided, and that comparison is becoming clear to them. Because distractions fade but genuine connection lingers in memory and spirit, and while they navigate this emotional awakening you must remain grounded, because their process is theirs, not yours to manage. You are not responsible for speeding it up, reassuring it, or validating it prematurely. Your responsibility is to continue walking in the growth that caused this exposure in the first place. Because it was your decision to release control and trust God that opened the door for truth to surface, and if God has begun this work in them He will complete it in His timing, not yours, not theirs, and not according to impatience, and this is where your faith deepens, because it is easier to trust when nothing seems to be happening than when you sense something shifting but cannot yet see results. Yet this invisible stage is often the most critical, because roots grow underground before anything becomes visible above the surface, and God is working in the roots of their heart. Uprooting pride, planting conviction, watering awareness, and preparing the soil for either reconciliation or redirection, and both outcomes require clarity, and clarity is exactly what exposure provides. So do not fear what is being revealed, do not question whether your impact was real, do not doubt whether they feel it. Because if God is exposing their hidden emotions, it means those emotions were significant enough to matter, significant enough to address, significant enough to transform. And in the end, this process will bring resolution, one way or another, because God does not reveal truth to create confusion, He reveals truth to establish alignment, and alignment always leads to peace, whether that peace comes through renewed connection built on honesty and maturity or through confident closure that frees you both to move forward without unresolved emotion lingering in the background. And as this chapter continues unfolding, remember that divine exposure is evidence of divine involvement, and if God is involved, then the outcome will not be random, it will be purposeful, refined, and ultimately beneficial for your growth, your destiny, and your emotional well-being, far beyond what temporary silence or past misunderstandings ever suggested. And now, as everything reaches its final stage, understand that when God exposes hidden emotions, He does not do it halfway. He brings the heart to a point of decision. A point where pretending is heavier than confessing, where pride is more exhausting than humility, and where silence becomes louder than speaking the truth. And this is where they are standing now, at the edge of their own awakening, realizing that what they tried to suppress has grown stronger in the dark, and what they attempted to ignore has become the very thing occupying their thoughts. Because divine exposure does not fade with time, it intensifies until action is taken, and whether that action becomes a heartfelt conversation, a sincere apology, a mature return, or a quiet acceptance of their mistakes, something will shift permanently, because once God reveals the truth of the heart, it cannot go back into hiding, and this is the closure of the old version of them, the version that operated from ego, fear, and emotional immaturity, and it is also the completion of the old version of you, the version that felt the need to chase clarity, over-explain your worth, or carry the emotional weight alone. Because both of you have been refined through this silence, both of you have been confronted with truth in different ways, and refinement always precedes alignment, and alignment is the true goal of every divine exposure, not chaos, not revenge, not emotional games, but clarity that leads to peace. And as this chapter closes, remember that you did not lose control when you let go. You gained strength, you gained faith, you gained self-respect. And by placing the situation in God's hands, you allowed Him to work in ways you never could, and now whatever happens next will not be built on illusion but on awareness, not on assumption but on honesty, not on fear but on understanding. Because when hidden emotions are finally brought into the light, they either build something stronger than before, or they release both souls to walk forward without unfinished business weighing them down, and either outcome is victory when it is guided by God. So stand firm in your peace, remain steady in your growth, and trust that if reconciliation is meant to happen, it will come with maturity and consistency. And if separation is meant to remain, it will come with clarity and acceptance. But in both cases you will not be left confused, you will not be left questioning your value, and you will not be left chasing answers, because divine exposure always ends with revelation, and revelation always brings freedom, and freedom is the true blessing hidden inside this entire process. So let this be the ending of doubt, the ending of emotional uncertainty, and the beginning of a chapter rooted in truth, confidence, and faith, knowing that the same God who exposed their hidden emotions is also protecting your heart, directing your steps, and aligning your future with something deeper, healthier, and more spiritually grounded than anything pride or fear could have sustained before.